What's the procedure?
Dude, I've done it before. You can, I'm sure you're aware of it, but you can pop these pills that have cameras on them. It'll just take pictures all the way down your system.
You're swallowing a camera.
This isn't the same one as last week then with the anal bleaching?
No. That was different. That was a different one.
But you still had a camera for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was
That was for OnlyFans, though.
Got it.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to episode 96 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband. Made it through that time, guys. How's it going? Jay, what's up, man?
All is good. We had that weight loss thing that we were going to do, and then we didn't do, and
Which I blame on you.
Maybe it was probably my fault, and I was bad for a couple of weeks. But let me tell you something. I have been on the wagon, off the wagon. No, on the wagon. On the wagon's the good one. For like the last week, and I am crushing. I'm losing weight left and right. I'm gonna be body fat 10% in a couple years.
Well, you don't want to just left and right. You want to get a lot of the weight out of the center there too. So focus on that one. Are you drinking tonight?
I am. Mauricio gave me for not drinking the last couple of weeks. I have been drinking, but he said
I'm just channeling the audience disappointment that you're like, it's drunk real estate, and you're not talking about real estate and not talking about drunk.
Look at this. I am this far into this bottle. I'm more than a glass into the bottle. It's called Stones and Bones 2022 from Portugal.
From Portugal or from Costco?
It is not from Costco.
It showed up on his doorstep. Someone sent it to him.
One of my best friends sent it to me. So thank you. thank you, one of my best friends. And so I am very much drinking this week, and I've been drinking, but this week I will make it blatantly obvious.
Excellent. Mauricio, you paying attention over there?
I do. I don't know where my bottle is. I'm drinking though. I've got my, it's a Bell Gloss. I popped it actually 2 days ago, and I've been drinking, with the little, what's it called? The air thing that I can preserve the wine. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm on a liquid diet today. So this is a good thing to have.
Well, how's it going, man? Everything good?
Everything's great.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you all week. Just want to make sure you're good. Everything's still sporting the collective, still representing. I see it.
Still represent. Somebody asked me about this. This is not just the collective. This is the OG, original. I don't think you can get these anymore.
Wow, make sure you get those sponsorship fees. AJ, what's up, man?
Doing good. Got my red solo cup.
You're looking good in blue. I don't know if I've seen you in a blue collared shirt on the podcast yet.
Yeah, not in a t-shirt. This is a new one. So
showing off the guns.
You know it. It's because I work out so much.
What are you drinking today?
Me and Jay just hitting the gym every day. I got my Diet Coke, and it's going strong.
Nice. I am drinking today. I'm not supposed to because I'm on antibiotics, but
it actually enhances the antibiotic effect. Yeah.
But I'm gonna do it just for you guys because that's how committed I am to the podcast. You guys have ticks up in your area?
Was it alcohol antibiotics?
Yeah,
that was antibiotics, right? Yeah. Alcohol used to be antibiotics.
Do you guys have ticks in your area?
Yeah.
Like,
you mean TikTok?
So I got bit by a deer tick. And it was on the back side of my leg, so I didn't really see it. And I don't have a lot of feeling there anyway because of my back surgery. And anyway, I was in the shower. It was like 24 hours later after I went for my walk in the woods. And I was just showering. I got a tick. So I go in, and basically they were like, look, we could either like test you in 6 weeks, but there's, a decent chance that you was on long enough that you have it. So just take 2 weeks of antibiotics and we'll just call it a day. I'm like, okay. So now I'm on antibiotics for 2 weeks, which is annoying. But I'm drinking Wild Turkey 101. I have a confession. This is my first time with a bottle of Wild Turkey 101. And it's strictly because in college, we used to do shots of the cheap Wild Turkey, and it was disgusting. I used to hate it. And so it always kind of put a weird vibe to me for the Wild Turkey. But then I had some of the 101 at a bar, and I liked it. So I got it now. Went and bought a bottle.
I always think of Wild Turkey as something that alcoholics drink.
That's true. I agree.
Yep, I think so too.
That's because it was cheap, right? If you get the cheap stuff, but these Wild Turkey, like they make all the way up to some of their bottles. I mean, they're called different things.
Make
It's
any
like
excuses you want, Kyle.
Some of those bottles
don't
make
need
it
to
all the way
explain
up
it
to $9.99.
yeah, there's like $1,000 Wild Turkey. Like
No. I mean $9.99.
I thought you meant actual. No, because there's like they have a whole different line that's not just Wild Turkey and stuff. I was like,
You're an
something
alcoholic. It's
reserve.
okay. It's okay to admit. We support you. We love you. It's not going to affect our opinion. You're an alcoholic. It's okay. Just go with it.
Okay. Anyway, can we get into this, gentlemen? Are we ready to go? Because
We're in such a serious mood today.
we got to get into this because we have part 2 of the economic update.
By the way, the reason we're so laid back is AJ has shown up. If you're not watching the pod, he's shown up in a casual, short-sleeved, like he looks like he just came back from the beach. Like I don't know what's going on there, but that's why we're all relaxed. You know, so
Setting the mood.
Except for Jay. Jay's in a funky mood, but that's all right.
Can we go now? Are we ready?
Let's do it, please.
Because we got to get going. Like, we have part 2 of our economic update. Jay had one last week, and we're doing part 2. And there's a lot to talk about. And we know Jay can talk. We had a slew of major releases over the week. We had jobs releases, we had GDP releases, we had PCE releases, and we're actually recording this on Wednesday for once. And we were able to like time it with the Fed meeting was today, which was kind of a bust. So it wasn't really even worth it. But either way, Jay's going to talk about it. So Jay, why don't you maybe let's break this up so it doesn't turn into a long thing. Let's go like one segment at a time. What do you want to start with?
Jay, but is this part 2 or is this part 96 of the economic update? I'm not quite sure.
We'd be done by now if you just let me talk.
Oh my God, Jay's so grumpy today. I love it.
I'm not grumpy. I'm in a good mood today. Hey, I walked 5 miles to the gym today. I worked out today. I'm feeling good today.
Stop saying the gym. Planet Fitness is not allowed to be called the gym.
I joined a new gym. It's a real gym.
LA Fitness?
No, it's called EOS Fitness, and it's a real gym.
That is also $9.99, isn't it?
No, I'm paying like $30 a month. This is big time.
Jeez, that's cutting into your Costco wine budget, isn't it?
This is big time. Okay, let me get into this. Let's start with GDP because that was the big news from last week. We talked about it last week. There was some rumblings that GDP could potentially come in negative. We all took a poll on where we thought it would come in. I think, Mauricio, I'll give you credit. I think you said like negative 0.3% or something, and that's where it came in, negative 0.3%.
I'm actually disappointed because I was actually going to grab the transcript from last week's episode and read you the part where you said predictions, and I said less than 0.5, and you said how much, and I said 0.3. Negative 0.3.
We could have used that as the intro this week.
We should re-record the intro.
Well, you get full credit. It came in at negative 0.3%, but I think we have to have some asterisks next to that negative 0.3%. In fact, the government's already put their asterisks there because this is a first reading. It's definitely not the final reading. Just like all government data, we tend to get multiple readings, and oftentimes subsequent readings, the second, the third, the final, are relatively close to the first. But in this case, there's a lot of reason to believe that we could see some revisions. We could even go from negative to positive. Don't know if that's going to happen, but I think there's a very reasonable chance that we see some revisions. So let's talk a little bit about GDP. For those that are watching this on YouTube, I just brought up a chart that basically outlines, number one, it outlines GDP from the last 8 quarters, but it also breaks down GDP into the 4 components that GDP is made up of. And so when the government measures GDP, they look at 4 things. One, they look at this thing called personal consumption expenditures, which is just basically how much people are buying. It's just consumer purchases. Number 2, they look at business investment, which includes like investing in CapEx for your business, building factories, buying inventory. So how much inventory is sitting on your shelves. So it's all the business investment that's going on. Number 3 is government spending, because we spend a lot of money from the government in this country. And so we factor that in because that contributes to the output of the economy. And then number 4 is what we call net exports. And that's exports minus imports. So basically GDP goes up when we export something, as it should. We're producing something in the country. It goes down when we import something, which I'll talk about that in just a second. And so what you can see if you're on YouTube, you're looking at this graph right now, is that in Q1, we saw a very, very large negative component to GDP from imports. That big purple bar below the line, below the zero line, is imports. Now you might think, okay, that is why we saw a negative GDP, because we had all these imports, and imports are a subtraction from GDP. They're a negative component of GDP. But here's the thing. In theory, imports are not a negative component of GDP. In theory, imports are no impact on GDP. And the reason for that is because for every dollar that we import of goods, one of 2 things or one of 3 things happens to those goods. Either it goes to business investment, it goes to businesses putting it on their shelves, in which case we have business investments that will go up by $1, or the government is buying that thing and government spending goes up $1, or that thing gets put on shelves and a consumer buys it and consumer spending goes up $1. So in theory, for every negative dollar that we get from imports, it should be offset by either government spending, business investment, or consumer spending. And so we shouldn't see a change in GDP from large imports. That said, this isn't the economy, and measuring the economy isn't perfect. And what we often find is that when we see large imports or large net exports, we see big numbers there. It can sometimes take time to resolve where that all those imports went. Did they go to government spending? Are they sitting on shelves somewhere? Did consumers buy them? Maybe they're sitting in a port in LA waiting to be unloaded from a boat. Maybe they're on a truck going to a warehouse. We don't know where all that inventory is. And so it's very possible that while we saw a big negative on the imports, and we actually saw a big positive to offset that on the business investment, but not big enough to totally offset it, it's very possible that when we see those revisions over the next couple months, that what we're going to find is that we find all those imports. We find them, they get unloaded off a truck or unloaded off of a boat.
Can't we just be a month early too? Like, can't we just be like they imported it like in March, and obviously it takes some time for people to be able to consume it, purchase it, do all these things. Like, it could just be next quarter, all of a sudden that's everyone buying this.
Yeah, in theory, that would go to business investment because it would be inventory that the business has paid for and they own. But sometimes they don't pay for it until they actually take possession of it. Sometimes it doesn't get counted if it's sitting on a boat. And there's stuff that's beyond my level of knowledge about how this works. But from what I've read, a lot of times large imports, when we see spikes in imports, it can be very difficult to figure out in real time where all those imports have gone. But over time, we should start to see them, and we'll likely see an impact in Q1. We'll probably see a revision in Q1 that'll look a little bit better. And we'll definitely see that average out over time. So even if we don't see that revision in Q1, we'll see a much better Q2 from any business inventory that wasn't counted in Q1.
Well, that'll go with it. But the first part is that like the J. Scott economic theory GDP version? I mean, generally speaking, when imports go up, GDP goes down, because even if it ends up, most of it's going to end up on the shelf of Walmart or something. But the consumer would have spent $1 either way. There's just the fact that they bought $1. Are they buying it from U.S. folks, or are they buying it from overseas? So to me, that did have an impact on GDP. And to your point, it might be temporary because maybe everybody was pre-jumping the gun on the tariffs, and so they imported more than they usually would, and that's going to affect imports in Q2. And so in Q2, it'll be the reverse, and so that'll help GDP. But this is the first time I'm hearing that imports going up does not negatively affect GDP. So is this the J. Scott theory?
It is not. If you do a Google search, you'll find about 1 billion results, including a good explanation from the Fed on exactly how.
And Mauricio, I don't think he's saying that it doesn't affect it negatively, but it's usually offset by the other side, because something has to happen to those imports when they get here, right? That offsets it. Isn't that what you're saying, Jay?
Imports should, in theory, have zero impact on GDP because they're offset somewhere else. In fact, it often goes the other way around. If let's say a car manufacturer imports a car from China, and they import it for 10,000 and then they sell it for 15,000.
Right. They get the 15.
You're gonna see a $10,000 negative on the import side, and you're gonna see a $15,000 consumer purchase in the PCE part, the consumption part, and that'll be positive. And so larger imports often cause GDP to go up, but in theory, it should never cause GDP to go down. But again, sometimes we have trouble counting stuff in real time, and so it may take time for us to kind of work out all the numbers and see if Q1 gets revised or Q2 gets impacted. Long story short, GDP in Q1 wasn't tremendously great, but it almost certainly wasn't negative. And
well, if you take out that one line item, it was 4.5%. So if you take out the front loading, it was a 4.5% growth. And that's why
what they estimated was people front loading, right?
Yes. But again, of that 4.5, that's a whole lot of inventory, business investment and inventory sitting on shelves and consumption and government buying that stuff that you have to subtract out. So you can't just.
That's what I'm saying. If you subtract out, so if you took out the overall, if you got rid of the imports and exports category, with that, the only other category that was negative was government spending.
Well, government spending it's not just that those are negative. So, for example, if there were no imports last year, business investment would have been a lot lower. It's a positive number, but it would have been a much, much smaller positive number. And consumer spending would have been a smaller positive number. So, I mean,
of course, I'm talking like a weighted average, though.
Yeah, and we also like missed out on the markup, right? So, like, I guess to your point in the last example, like a business imports a car for $10,000, they would typically be importing it and then selling it, but now it's sitting on a shelf. So the difference of them paying for their inventory versus selling it to the consumer, that would be the difference that you're talking about, I'm guessing, AJ.
Sorry, that's why the Fed was talking about it, and even they said today the economy is really strong, and they're like, it's growing, and so it's not that. I mean, that's a good thing, but it can make it hard on the Fed.
So here's the other thing to keep in mind, and this is kind of the less good news from GDP. We don't weight all four, and when I say we, the government, I don't do anything. The government doesn't weight all four of these things equally. And it's that bright purple bar, if you're looking on YouTube, the personal consumption, basically consumer spending, that gets weighted the most. It's about 65 to 70% of GDP. So the vast majority of GDP is consumer spending. And what you see is consumer spending in Q1 was a good bit less than in the previous quarters. So one thing...
Sentiment's way down.
Sentiment is way down. It's very likely that people did spend less in Q1. That may just be a remnant of tariffs, and once the tariffs all get resolved and we move on with our lives, things go back to normal. Or it could be something that's more persistent. And Jay Powell at the Fed meeting today said the exact same thing.
Are we going to go into the Jay Powell meeting? Is that because I feel like GDP, like the summation of that is basically like it was weird, right? Not what's going on and.
Is that just because I nailed it on the head? You guys are trying to like explain it away?
No, it's just like a lot. Think about the first quarter, everything that happened. Not like, we switched over presidents, we had tariffs, we had a bunch going on.
I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk about this next week because I'm literally, you guys, it seem like you guys are ganging up on me. I'm literally pulling up Barron's, which is a pretty respectable, publication. This is the historic 41% surge in imports during the first quarter ahead of the expected tariffs, subtracted 5 percentage points from the GDP growth.
Right. And that's what AJ said, right?
That's what I'm
basically
talking about.
It came to,
so skewed. Like,
I get it, but it's like, we can't just suddenly, if it wasn't for imports, we would have grown 5%. And if my grandma,
well, but that's a guess, right? Too, like you can guess on that, but you don't really know that, okay, you're assuming everything else was equal. Like you're using previous months and previous quarters and to in order to extrapolate that. So like you don't really know that. Like that's just a guess. So I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like it was a weird quarter.
And what do you guys think is going to be happening in the next? Let's assume that this continues and nothing really changes in the next couple of months. I mean, do you think imports are going to continue to rise, or is now because of the tariffs going to be reversed out?
The expectation is that they're going to drop off considerably in Q2, simply because we know with tariffs we're importing a whole lot less stuff. That'll be a whole separate discussion that we'll have.
I mean, my plan would have been, hey, like let's stock up on 3 months worth of stuff. Let this all play out, and hopefully in 3 months we have all these tariffs figured out, and I didn't really miss anything, right? Like it didn't cost me a lot more because I had the foresight of stocking up for 3 months.
Seems like that's what everybody did.
Yeah.
Like the huge numbers.
And it might work out. Who knows? I mean, the meeting didn't go particularly well with Canada, but maybe other meetings will go better. All right. Do you want to move on to the Fed meeting then?
Yeah. So let's talk about the Fed. So at the time this came out yesterday, the Fed met and decided not to raise or lower interest rates. Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, got up and gave his typical, we're waiting for more data before we make a move. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough data. And honestly, I've said this for the last couple months since all the tariff stuff started. I think it's a reasonable standpoint. Basically, the Fed is looking, the Fed has two jobs. They have what's called a dual mandate. First job is they need to keep employment stable. They need to keep full employment. They don't like high unemployment. And number two, they need to keep prices stable. They don't like high inflation. They don't like prices going up. And so that's
totally
the two.
They totally suck at that second one. Like 10% increase over 5 years is not stable. But anyway, go ahead.
So yes, it's a hard, both of them can be a hard thing to do. I'm not judging them right now. I'm just talking about that's their job. Those are the two things that they need to do. And last week we saw data, the most recent data about both those things, about jobs and about inflation. So let's start with, before I talk about what Powell said, let's talk about the data that he was looking at when they made this decision today not to raise or lower rates. On the jobs front, 177,000 jobs created last month. Allegedly. So we had a revision. We had a revision from the previous 2 months down about 50 or 60,000. But we've had revisions, and I've talked about this. When you have an economy that's kind of slowing down, the revisions are going to be towards the negative because this is all based on surveys. And when you get later surveys,
don't try and justify the numbers and try.
No, but it's true. When the economy is speeding up, you get positive revisions. Because the revisions are based on later surveys, and later surveys, if the economy.
I'm Jay. When I make those comments, I'm not on the people who are doing this. They're doing the best that they can, trying to get this information. But my point is that, like, how many times are we just kind of fallen for this, where everyone's like, oh, 177, that was relatively strong. Like, how are we still falling for that? That, like, this is not the real number. This is going to get revised down.
How much off was it last year? Crazy amount. Like, it was shocking.
100%. And we're going to see revisions, and they happen, but you just have to take the numbers for what they are, and we can't try.
The numbers are fake. That's what they are.
Well, they're the best numbers. So here's the thing.
No, they're not. They're not the best numbers. I heard you about to say that. They're not the best numbers. This is 2025. We have the internet. People can actually talk to each other real time. These surveys were developed in like the 70s.
Yeah, but you know what? I heard a good argument about the issues in general with the surveys. Now, I know we're getting a little off topic, but I think it was even the internet. Like even your definitions and my definitions mean different things to people. Like when you say, "Are you looking for a job?" They're like, "Yeah, I'm looking for a job." But what I mean, you meaning like I was looking for a job a year ago or 6 months ago, and they don't understand what they're really looking at. Have you been looking for a job in the last 2 days?
I want a better job.
Or a better job, or like even the small definitions. Everybody has such a different opinion or definition of whatever they're asking them, and so it's challenging, man. I don't know how
we can't even trust election polls anymore. So, like, how are we supposed to trust these surveys that people are calling up anonymous people? It's the most ridiculous thing ever. And you say, like, we have ADP reports. I'm sure if the government wanted to get their together, they could just give us a number of what the government jobs are real time. Like
And
it's
there's
like,
a certain type of person that answers surveys.
it's true. That's why they have a 30% response rate right now.
Look, I'm not arguing any of this, but here's the thing. If we don't use these numbers, then we have to move on to the next segment because I've got nothing left to talk about.
You got a lot. You could just move on. It'd be like jobs.
All right, hold on. He's got a point. Jay's not wrong there.
No, Jay,
got
go to
nothing
the
else.
Jolt survey now. Go to the Jolt survey. Let's act like that's a good data point.
Yes, I know, and we can slice and dice. Everybody looks at the headlines, and we can slice and dice jobs a million ways. Here's the thing: 177, great. It's probably not the right number, but we saw revisions up a few months ago, so maybe it'll be revised up, maybe it'll be revised down. We don't know, but here's the thing:
Wait.
It wasn't negative.
Yeah, you're like talking about like it's a 50-50 shot of like
24 out of 27.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's like
let's move on.
24
Let's
goes
move
down,
on. But
3 go up.
here's my point. My point is, it didn't come in at negative 177,000. If we saw negative 177,000, we'd be a lot more concerned than if we see 177,000, because either way, it's getting revised down most likely. But even if it gets revised down 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, that tells us that we have positive job growth. And there's a lot of concern based on what's going on with government jobs and DOGE, what's going on with the supply chain and tariffs, what's going on with the tech industry. There's a lot of concern that we're losing jobs and that we're not actually growing. Unless the revision is 170,000, which it is not, I'm willing to bet it's not
Why
177,000.
not? Previous times it's been 150 in a month.
No, it hasn't. It has not been that big in a single month.
What's a million jobs divided by 12? Because that wasn't that the last revision last year was
that's 80. That's 80,000 on average. So anyway, my point is that for what it is, a first release of last month's job data, it was actually pretty good. If there's anything to complain about, the two biggest things the biggest thing to complain about is where the jobs are being created. They're being created in healthcare, which that's a good thing. But the other big place it was being created was in the supply chain, truckers, dock workers, retail, which was very likely a compensation for all the imports and inventory that was coming into the U.S. So you could say that the types of jobs that we were seeing last month weren't like promising, but regardless, the jobs numbers were good last month. And
Not just last month. The job numbers every month this year have been staggering. Like
they've been great for 3 years.
Great. Jay, it's just a quick question. USA population growth 1%, right?
Yeah.
We have 300 million people, right?
No, we don't.
A little bit more.
More than that.
Okay, well, I'm just using
800 million if you believe the people that think we have 500 million immigrants.
I'm just using easy numbers so we could do the math on this, right?
Yep.
So if you take 1% of that and then you take every month, that means we are growing in population 250,000 people per month on average in people. So if we have 250,000 people we're adding per month to our population in the country, then how can
1% of 300 million is actually 3 million. But if you want to round,
and you
down
take
to
that and divide it by 12 because we're doing monthly. Calling me out on math. I'm the underwriter, Jay.
Wait a second. Did you say we're growing 1% a month?
No, I said 1% per year, and then which is 30 million, and then you divide by 12.
Okay, great.
Which is 3 million, divide by 12, because that's what we're talking about, monthly job numbers, Jay. Thank you. Then anything under 250,000 jobs, we are adding less jobs than we're adding people.
But you forgot that COVID killed 4% of the population and still killing like 3. So that's like negative like 800,000 a month.
This is not the the conspiracy theory episode.
My point is that even if you take 177 and you take off your 50,000, you're down to 125. That's half the number of jobs we're adding per month as we're growing in population. So even if you take these numbers.
Okay, now Kyle, I need you to subtract out the people that are retiring
and dying.
And
my point's not to say that we should be adding 250,000 jobs. My point's to saying if we're like, what's the good number we should be adding? And it's not like 177 minus 50,000. That's not excellent job growth. We're hopefully keeping par. We're hopefully keeping enough to sustain ourselves. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's not including the illegal immigrants that apparently we got 4 million coming in a year or two.
Okay. I'm going to go back to what I was saying before. We have data. It's the best data we have. And that data is indicating that the job situation is actually pretty decent.
I'm with Jay on this one. Guys, sorry. I got to turn my back on you guys. I'm with Jay on this one.
If AJ's going to agree with me, then we're it doesn't matter what you guys think.
Yeah, it's just me and Jay are together on this one. Sorry,
guys. We don't agree on much. So if
I love how you're not specifying what, AJ. You're actually with them. You're just saying you're with Jay on this one.
I'm saying the job numbers that we have, however you slice them and dice them, because I guess look at it like this: it's a comparison of what's been used ongoing. So if they are bad, they're still bad in the same way they've always been.
Exactly.
It leads to those results. So
exactly. And here's the other thing. We're talking, we kind of got onto this topic by talking about what the thought pattern for the Fed might be in terms of rates going up and down. The Fed's looking at this data, and they're looking at this data and saying this looks like good data. So regardless of whether it's good or bad, the Fed's going to say it's good data. So that's how it's going to reflect on their interpretation and decision making. So that's the job side. Inflation side, we got inflation numbers both from the first quarter and from last month, or I guess March, last week. And March, we are a month behind because the PCE inflation number, which is the kind of the Fed preferred number, it's probably the most interesting number to the Fed, but it's also the last inflation number that gets released. We also have CPI and PPI and all these other numbers that get released earlier in the month, and so we're a month behind on this PCE inflation number. But the March inflation was actually, if you strip out core, it was negative 0.1%. So we actually saw deflation. Core was up 0.1%, so super low number. So basically, we saw no inflation in March. Now, you take these two things together, and the Fed should be looking and saying, great, jobs are stable, inflation's stable, no reason to raise or lower rates. They're accomplishing what they want to accomplish. They're happy with jobs, they're happy with inflation. Now, here's the thing. We all know that with tariffs, like those things are likely to change. We don't know exactly how.
Because for the record too, like if you want to just look at inflation, we now have hit the Fed's target for December. So like when the Fed came out and they did their predictions for the year at the beginning of the year of where the targets they wanted to hit, they had, I think it was 3 rate cuts priced in with inflation down to exactly what it is right now. Was it 2? And so theoretically, we've already skipped ahead to December as far as inflation's concerned for the Fed. So if we have stable employment and we've already hit inflation to the point where they thought we were going to be in December after 3 rate cuts, then theoretically we should have cut.
Yes, but, and this is what Powell has pointed out for the last couple months, there's reason to believe, it's a reasonable assumption that tariffs are going to drive inflation higher. And so he is averse to cutting rates with the risk of inflation going higher, and then his rate cuts fueling that fire and making it even worse. And so from his perspective, the economy, the recession, employment, all the GDP, all those things are not so bad that we need to cut rates. And because we don't know what's going to happen with inflation, we should be cautious and wait and see.
And this has been his take for how long now? And it essentially the thing that it's not just, we're talking about the money supply. So whether or not we say inflation or not, the money supply, when you get low interest rates, acts as a leverage point. So we do not have a money supply that's shrunk back down to what it was pre-inflation. When you look at that money supply, when you inject capital and you drop interest rates and you can put that money to work, it's not a 1-for-1. So if the money supply actually shrunk, then you would have little effect of lowering interest rates, leveraging that capital into overheating the economy. But when that money supply hasn't shrunk, it's just not moving. but it's not gone. It's not moving. Lower interest rates creates velocity of
Yeah,
money.
thank you. The M2 is creeping up. I mean, it did come down for a little bit, and now it's kind of creeping up
And
again.
barely if you look before 2020, which caused the inflation. So we're at a point where we have all of this money. It's not gone. It's floating around. It's not being used. Transactions aren't happening. So all of a sudden, interest rates, even though they're high, it's not affecting the money supply. And those interest rates will be like gas on a fire when you have money supply like it, because it will create transactions. The velocity of money will start picking up, and they'll do it on a very, very quick leveraged way. And then they're going to have to retract and drop interest rates again, which is their worst nightmare. That is like what they absolutely do not want to do, is lower to have to re-up them again.
Right. And don't forget that the data, Jay, all kidding aside here, obviously, you're doing a great job, Jay. No matter what Kyle says, you're doing a great job. Like I don't want you to think otherwise. But all this data we have is most of that is lagging data, right? It's looking at stuff that happened earlier on in the year. And then the problem with the interest rates is that there's a lag forward. So like whenever you make adjustments in interest rates today, they won't take effect for another 6, 12, 18 months. So it's kind of this quandary where like, yeah, today it might be this, but what is it going to be in 6 or 12 months?
And yet they say they're data dependent. I guess
Yeah,
that's
why they
the
did
whole
it,
thing. He literally said in the meeting today that the cost of waiting and seeing is relatively low. And I said to myself, he's like, does he actually think that? Because historically, if you look at the Fed, what happens every single time? They wait too long, and then the wheels fall off, and then they have to react, and they have to drastically drop rates. Never have they
drop
gone...
rates though because the wheels fall off. I think that's where you're getting mixed up. They don't do it to prevent the wheels from falling off. They do it when the wheels fall off.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's my point. When he literally said that the costs to waiting are fairly low, I think was his quote. And I'm saying to myself, like, the cost is the wheels falling off. The cost is that, like, you just like you do every time, you can never achieve this soft landing. You always wait until there's a hard landing and then react to it. So like
but the economy's growing. That's the problem. It's like they're stuck in a huge money supply, economic growth, high employment, like historically super high.
And here's the other thing. I mean, and we all know this, even though Powell doesn't want to come out and say it directly. He's alluded to it, and we all know it. If tariffs don't get resolved, and we don't know, so we've yet to hear, are tariffs going to be like a persistent thing for the next 5 years or the next 3.5 years, as long as Trump's in office? Are we going to see tariffs to raise revenue? Or are tariffs going to get negotiated away in the next couple of weeks? And so there's or are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? We don't know. But here's the thing. In a worst case where tariffs don't go away anytime soon, or even if they go up, it's almost certain that we're going to see inflation. And Powell knows this, and Powell is not going to try and guess what Trump is thinking and what he's going to do. Instead, what he's saying is Trump's going to do what he's going to do, and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to make the best decision I can as the data's coming in, because there's so much uncertainty around what the economic policy with tariffs is going to be. And I suspect that if Trump said last week, all tariffs are off, we're back to zero, we would have seen a cut today. I really think that's the case.
I don't think that's the case, because that's totally divergent from how they've been acting. I mean, last year in their prices, you have unemployment where it's at, which the first part of this year was growing astronomically. And then you have huge money supply, you have investment, we don't have defaults, we have incomes rising. So like,
What's the reason other than, so like, first of all, Jay, I completely agree with everything you said. So that's two different people who've said that. Yeah, I just want to go against AJ. But I guess the point is that, like, what's the point of keeping them this high? We're already, if you look at the real rates, as you say, if our core PCE is mid twos, and like we already have. We can come down like a full percentage point in our rates and still be restrictive. So what's the point of keeping them this high?
The same thing in last fall when we saw inflation come down. It's like, why isn't he doing anything? It's because of the effect of it. Once again, so there's two sides that interest rates are going to hit. You have the money supply, but then you have the availability and actual ability to deploy them. When you have high employment and you have wages going up, you have no default, you have a population that can accept that debt and that leverage and deploy it, not just businesses, because businesses are doing great. They've got cash on hand, everything else. You got homeowners. So, I mean, you're talking about the highest equities, high income. You have high employment, and you have money supply that has not even shrunk from the time that it caused inflation. So he's looking at that going, just like he was last fall, and he's like, listen, we can't. It's the effect of it. It's not that it's time.
Well, I'm not saying like drop a full percentage point now, but what I'm saying is like we're way above what they believe the neutral rate to be.
Well, so let's look at why we cut. And again, I keep saying we. I don't take responsibility for it. Let's look at why the Fed cut 3 times in the second half of last year. My take is that they saw inflation coming down quickly, and they were concerned that we were actually going to have deflation. Not overly concerned, but they saw the risk of maybe inflation was coming down too quickly, and they needed to get ahead of that. And so I think they lowered rates to kind of slow the rate of drop on inflation in the second half of last year. I don't think they're concerned right now about deflation. I don't think they're concerned. I don't think they're going to drop it as a precautionary measure to keep inflation from going too low right now, which is the reason they did it last year. And so, but again,
last year we didn't ever even get it to their nominal rate. How are they? Inflation didn't ever even drop down to what their target last year. It never even got there.
It didn't, but it was decreasing every month. It was decreasing month over month. So there was reason to believe that it was that we were going to hit the 2%, and we might go past it.
The Fed still has shelter at 4.3% year over year growth, and we all know that. So like all of this data is super lagging. So like the fact that they're actually moving ahead of the curve is
okay. We're getting in the weeds now.
Is that bad?
It's because you talked, Kyle.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Look at Grumpy Jay coming back. Jeez.
I feel like we're running long on this segment, but go for it. Keep going.
Well, that was expected. I mean, anytime Jay does his TED talk on economic, updates, we know that's going to happen.
I guess I just wanted to push back on AJ that we shouldn't have cut unless it weren't for tariffs. I agree. I'm not mad at Powell for not cutting, because I agree. Like with the tariffs, it's very uncertain what's happening. But at the same time, like if we were at neutral rate right now and we were getting the same data we've had for the last 6 months, then we would say this is a good economy. Nothing has to be done. So the fact that we're not at neutral rate, to me, you would have been heading towards neutral rate. I guess that's all I'm saying, because we have quote unquote full employment. We have inflation that's heading in the direction we want. And it's even if it wasn't, even if it was stagnant, like 2.5% inflation, like that's not alarm bells at all. Like if we held steady at 2.5%, the only reason we made up the 2% number, I'd argue 2.5% is just fine. So in that, it's just my belief. We can argue whether or not their neutral rate is correct. We should be closer to neutral rate. We should be closer to, okay, this is a good economy. Let's keep it that way, instead of let's have a restrictive or a accommodative policy. I guess that was my point.
All right, let's move on.
All right, Jay, you got one last one for economic update, or we're going to skip over?
I don't know what I had next. I think we're good for now.
We're good for now?
Yeah.
It was an hour. So
This is not the prediction show, but is anybody else predicting, like I am, that there's going to be 0 rate cuts this year unless there's some major significant liquidity crisis where they're going to panic and cut majorly? But if everything goes according to plan,
that's what I said last year.
That there are no cuts?
I said last year if there was cuts, it would be very little.
What about hikes? Any chance they hike? If there's a lot of inflation from tariffs?
Current markets say 0% chance. There wasn't a single mention of a hike in the entire rhetoric today in the meeting.
But we all know that changes quickly. I think we would have to see significant. Here's the thing. I think we can probably all agree that any inflation we're going to see from tariffs is I'm going to use the word, but it's true.
Transitory.
It's transitory.
It's transitory.
It will go down.
He's
So
starting to sound a lot like a central banker these days. I don't know
Yeah,
if that-
because you're
just
going
me?
after Powell's job, aren't you? You heard that Powell might be on the chopping block, and you're slowly putting your name in there.
I sent a nice email to Trump last week asking him if he would consider me. So
He's one of the hired paid public servants, isn't he?
yeah. I think there's probably less than a 50-50 chance I'll get the job, but hey, who knows? But yeah, I think we all agree that any inflation we see from tariffs is going to be it's going to last for as long as tariffs last, and so I think Powell's going to be very hesitant to raise rates, knowing that we could stop the inflation with just policy changes. I mean,
Like he said in his first meeting of the first of the year, he's like, we baked in the impact of tariffs in their numbers. So they're like, and we still see the economy growing, everything else. So I agree. You're not going to turn around and lift rates up, reverse any policy change for something that
I got two words for you guys. Ready? Saving face. You got the Chinese who are big on saving face. You got Trump who's big on saving face. This might get dragged on a little bit longer than you think.
Anyway, we could move on because we do have to pretend that we're a real estate show here, even though we like to talk economics a lot.
Wait. This is an important. It relates to obviously interest rates and mortgages. I mean, it has a huge impact on real estate. So let's not,
I wish there was more to talk about in real estate. I do this every week, but it feels like real estate's been boring the last year.
Because when we do the back and forth, when we do our text back and forth, you always knock every single real estate topic that I suggest. You just knock it down.
I knock every topic you suggest. It has nothing to do with
But
real
Jay does have a point where, like, if you follow DRE Daily, the newsletter, there's probably 2 topics every week, and there are real estate topics, but you look at that and you say, oh, that's interesting, but there's a reason that he's able to put it in DRE Daily is because you read in 2 minutes and you feel like you got everything you need to know. There's not a lot to discuss. So it is getting tougher to find true real estate topics at the moment, but I think we found one here because since 2022, we've seen a correction in commercial real estate. So we're going to talk commercial real estate in the 20 to 25% range. And most experts believe that this correction would have led to a slew of delinquencies and foreclosures in 2024. Well, we're now in 2025, and it led to back in 2024, everyone was saying survive to 25, because everyone thought that if we could weather the storm that was coming in 2024, interest rates would be lower in 2025, everything would be okay, we'd be back to just normal commercial real estate. Well, we're in 2025. We still haven't seen the increase in foreclosures. We still haven't seen the lower interest rates. So I guess we're at that point now where I'll ask AJ, like, is the data that we're looking at now telling us that the storm is past us, or it's still ahead of us, or in the middle of it, or like what's going on right now?
AJ, before you answer that, it's not about survive to 25. It's about persist until 26. You know that.
I was going to let AJ lead into that as kind of an intro, but good steal there. Good. That was a good one.
It's 20. We have 20% right now of the outstanding commercial debt is maturing in 25. And this has been just kicked down the road, right? So we have this environment where high interest rates have caused assets to struggle because when they have to mature or when their debt matures, they refinance, they're going from 3% to 8%. And it's not affordable anymore. And so what happened is banks, they didn't want to foreclose. And at the time, the Biden administration told them, put these off. Let's kick this down the road. And they did. They kept just pushing things going down. So now we are about 20%, of the market. And a huge percent of those are offices as well as others. What has also happened, though, as you kick it down the road, it's compounding out problems. As in, the more people become delinquent, right? As you keep moving it down the road, the bigger that pile gets. And they're not 8% that didn't work 3 years ago doesn't work today. Like if anything, it's worse today. So this problem is just kind of kept going, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. But it's not like, I would say, catastrophic necessarily, right?
But it is preventing the reset or the beginning of the new cycle, though, right? I mean,
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
it's hanging
Absolutely.
over our heads, and we got to clear this, and it just isn't being cleared.
What really resulted in it's a valuation problem. So what happened then was the market didn't reset, values didn't change. So all of a sudden the market froze. Just stopped. Sellers are selling or trying to sell at 4 caps like it was 3 years ago. There's no comps to suggest otherwise. There's no delinquencies, no bankruptcies. And so it's created this market where it's just like it froze, just like stagnated, like we've never seen before. Transactions just collapsed. And so you can't get sellers to sell at certain prices. And obviously, people that are in delinquents, they're not going it. So there's not deals coming out of the market. So the market froze and it's been stuck. And so 2025, we've got, this perceived problem, but certain industries like, you guys could talk about this, but delinquencies in multifamily in April went way up. Over $1 billion in newly delinquent loans in April. For there, we had the same thing with lodging and retail, and then industrial was the lowest at 0.5% delinquency rate.
Can I just clarify one thing, because I'm going to forget when we move through the topic. When you say multifamily went way up, I actually read that report, and the multifamily delinquency that went way up is CMBS. Multifamily delinquency went way up.
Excuse me, thank you. I'm talking about for all of those, the CMBS market.
Right. And so the problem is like, that's an extremely, because I read that and I was like, holy, this is not the data that I've been reading, until I kind of dove into it a little bit. And then I realized, okay, it's not the data I'm reading because it's not the real data. CMBS makes up a small fraction of the overall multifamily market. You got to remember, multifamily has GSEs, right? They have the government sponsored Fannie, Freddie, FHA, which makes up, I couldn't find data on 2024 yet, but 2023, it was already 60% of all loans right there. And you know what the delinquency rate currently is on GSE things? So I assume you saw the same one. It was like 7% on CMBS or something. You know what the delinquency rate is for multifamily GSE loans? Just guess. Any one of you guess?
1%?
4%.
6%.
0.65%.
Wow.
That's close.
And before we, I don't want to lose everyone. So when we say CMBS, we're talking about commercial mortgage-backed securities, and we say GSE, we're talking about government-sponsored entities. Just remember, commercial real estate is not multifamily. It's industrial, it's warehouse, it's even self-storage now. I think you guys are big boys enough now, AJ, where self-storage now is officially added to the whole commercial, right? But it's office, it's retail. It's like it comprised of 10 or 11 subcategories. So when you hear commercial real estate, even though the multifamily, we use that term a lot, it doesn't mean multifamily. There's just there's literally 10 or 11 categories. And so multifamily is going to be 1/10 or well, at least from a category standpoint, 1/10 of that.
But if we're just talking about, okay, I'll let you talk about what you just said.
So I just all the headlines had the multifamily at the top because multifamily has been extremely resilient. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there on Bigger Pockets, especially, and other people, they just want multifamily. And so they'll cherry pick data on that stuff. But like I put up a graph, and so go check out on YouTube. It's hard to explain the entire graph, but it just shows how small CMBS is, a portion of all multifamily loans. And multifamily right now is very resilient. So to say that there is because you saw this hike in CMBS delinquencies. CMBS, by definition, you get a CMBS loan because you couldn't get your property was riskier on a profile that you couldn't get a GSE or you couldn't get a traditional loan in that sense. So that's just take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but that's so. I mean, we can slice it and dice it a number of different ways. Here's an example, and I pulled this from our buddy Brian Burke, who, when it comes to multifamily data, I trust more than most people. Gave a presentation at Passive Pockets conference last weekend, and this was in his slide deck. But this is basically multifamily loan delinquency from banks, so FDIC insured banks, which is basically most banks. And this is pretty disturbing. Like we're seeing a trend that's very similar to what we saw back in 2008. And so
into April, it's now the ones that I've seen are matched with 2008 into April. And that was that uptick surge into April.
Once again, though, still not taking into consideration 60 to, I don't know the data in 2024, but I know that most loans in 2024 where no one was getting these bridge loans and a lot of the CMBS stuff. Everyone was going Fannie Freddie. So
Well,
I'm guessing
2024, I'm sure they couldn't.
Right, exactly. So I'm guessing 2024 we're somewhere in the 60-70% of loans in multifamily are
But those aren't the
GSEs.
loans that are the problem. The loans that are the problem are when the bank loans were cheap and coming in. So that's the problem. It's 2021 and half of 2022 that were maturing on those 3-year rollovers, right? So that's the issue.
And also, like 20, you say like 20% is all coming due. Like that doesn't even seem like a crazy number to me, because considering like standard loans in commercial real estate is 5 years, it's 20%, right? Like that means by definition they're rolling over 20% every year. So that doesn't even seem like a crazy number to me. I guess is like it's not like it's. I mean, if you look at previous years. Like I remember everyone saying going into 2024, oh, this wall of maturities coming, this wall of maturities coming. Well, we're a quarter of the way into 2025. What happened to that wall of maturities tanking the entire market?
So it's over a 20% increase of loan maturities from last year. That's a huge increase.
I mean, that's not the data I had, but I'm not going to argue data with you.
So when you look at, and once again, you may be looking at just multifamily. I'm talking about commercial real estate as a whole. And that's the topic. Like when we look at the whole commercial real estate landscape, all of it.
yeah, and so the data I'm looking at right here is 957 billion, so just under $1 trillion coming due in 2025. The total commercial market's about 5 trillion, so that's right at 20%. Another 663 billion, so another 13-14% in 2026.
But should we extract, well, again, not to get off, I mean, it's almost like I feel like we should extrapolate the data just for the majority of our listen. I mean, most of our listeners are in multifamily, right? They're in self-storage. They're in, I mean, not many of my clients are in, office and warehouse, although they are, but there's not a huge number, right?
So so commercial real estate, let's take it as a whole, which could be multifamily, it can be self-storage, you're talking hotels, you're talking
Office,
retail,
hospitality.
Right. Exactly. So from their lows in 2017, 18, 19, delinquency rates are up 150%, and they are the highest by far, saying in the last decade, nowhere even close. So, and this surge is really coming from 2024 into 2025. So when you look at what's happening, I think there is, I mean, maybe not catastrophic, but I mean, that's a big change. Like this is a huge increase in a market that has been frankly rolling over a lot of this debt. But the problem is this, there's nowhere for it to go. So we're at 8%. It's not like, once again, it's like, well, we'll just mature. So these loans are just waiting around, and then at some point you can't wait anymore. That's a big adjustment for the market, meaning that if you've not taken these delinquencies and you haven't gone through the cycle, you haven't gotten rid of them, the market has not adjusted to this reality yet. So the moment you start to adjust to the reality of distressed assets, that changes the market. And that's the big point of this, right? Is that the market we haven't had distress, but it's artificial. It's only because the market hasn't allowed the distress to come through. When it does, that changes the market's perception.
I don't know if you threw out these numbers. I ran to the bathroom at the beginning of your segment. I apologize. Coffee and wine together didn't mix well. But the data that I'm looking at is basically, and just to give some high level context, the total commercial debt market, like total commercial loans, is somewhere around 5 trillion. Self storage is somewhere about 2.2 trillion, so about a little over 40% of all mortgages is multifamily, which makes sense if you think about it. AJ, you could, we've talked about this. Self storage, typical loan to value on self storage might be 40, 50%. Office is 30, 40%. And so it's multifamily where you get the 60, 65, 70, 75% loans. But the data that I've seen, and again, thanks to Brian Burke for this, but of that 5 trillion in total commercial mortgage debt, last year alone, we saw 384 billion. So like 7% of that, that was kicked down the road. Basically, it's delinquent but not foreclosed on. The lender agreed to work it out for some period of time, and so that's $384 billion worth of debt that the lender could decide tomorrow, or the lenders, I guess it's a lot of lenders, but the lenders could decide tomorrow, I'm not kicking this can anymore. And then tomorrow we wake up and there's $384 billion worth of properties that are now in foreclosure.
It's it's a big deal. And frankly, it's been a frustrating thing because we're out here and I'm trying to buy. Like we want to buy. And over the last 2 years, there's been nothing. Like, yeah, I mean, you can't transact again because the discrepancy, that buy sell spread, ask spread's huge, right? The seller,
because the ask price, like, the seller doesn't want to sell for a loss, right? And since they've worked out their loan, they believe that they have another year at least to wait. And so they're not going to sell for a huge loss if the alternative is to wait and hope things get better.
And this year, that tune changed. So I bought 2 major assets that were in fill up from development. They've never made money. It got pushed down. They now have to make a decision. They totally walked away from the equity. We picked it up. We got 4 or 5 more. So we're finally seeing now sellers, and what they're doing is they go, we know we have to deal with this, so we're going to try to sell it. And so even if we're walking it away before it goes into, the bank has to deal with it or go over, but still, that's a tiny percentage of the market, and we're just now seeing it. These are things that should have come up, right, 2 years ago. So what happens when all of a sudden it starts to compound, and then all of these, it's now, okay, now lots of properties are hitting the market. The market will readjust value.
Question, AJ, are those, what size groups are you talking about that are doing that? Are those like large shops, smaller shops, syndications?
Large developers that could walk away from the equity.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me because we've seen a couple of, like, for people, anyone who's willing to sell for losses right now, it's usually because they basically triage. So like they look at their portfolio and there's some with distress and then they need some cash, right? To help out the other deals. And so they will basically thin the herd. And they'll say, okay, this is the least likely of us.
We're doing that. Everyone's so reshuffle.
Right. And so they'll sell for a loss so they could pull some of that cash out and so they can help their other deals. But because we're not seeing any syndicators like willing to sell for a loss unless like the bank has taken it over.
Yeah, exactly. They're holding on. They've all gone renegotiated. Oh, it's okay. I got an interest only. Right. And they're doing all of this stuff, but the fundamentals aren't changing. They're not getting higher rents. Occupancies aren't rising. Interest rates aren't coming down. So this hot potatoes gotta end sometime where everybody's done playing the game. It's just not turning around. Right. And this is the big question of how that will affect the market. So like we have, even once again, my portfolio, I have 2 deals that we're like, geez, these things are not performing. We'll sell at a loss, go buy other ones with it, use that money, helps out the total fund. Get it? I'm fine with that. So we have a lot of people that are shuffling the cards around, trading out assets. But what we're not seeing is the ones that are really in distress still. So these are still like people are making choices of reallocating capital more than we have seen somebody like, I have to, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, but the difference though with you, AJ, 'cause obviously you're experienced, you're at the top of your game, and you're dealing with funds. But like if you have a regular syndicator out there who is deciding whether to let a property go, there's more than just the financials that come into play. It's like their reputation is huge, right? Like if you're a syndicator and you end up making the decision to let it go and lose all of your investors' equity, that's going to be a deal. I mean, they won't be able to raise money. Yeah, there's a hangover effect. They're not going to be able to raise money ever again versus, on this fund, like if you're just looking at it from a pure mathematical ROI perspective, it might make sense to sell here and reposition to do this. But if you're a syndicator and you've got 2 deals under your belt and this is like one deal is going to go south and that's basically going to kill your career.
Yeah, I'm basically, I've done almost a complete 180 on this where like I was like where AJ's talking about last year where I'm like, this is going to happen. Like they're not going to be able to do everyone. I'm sure they're going to work it out with some people that they have long-standing relationships with or something, but like, there's going to be people who just can't help it. And I always hear like there's whispers and through the grapevine, this person is in trouble. This person's in trouble. This group's in trouble. And like something's going to hit and it just never does. It just keeps like, we're talking a year later, it keeps getting kicked down the road. And I guess my question is like, what's to stop them from continuing to kick at this point? Because we've thrown the rule book out. Like the rule book's no longer there. I think it's the financial crisis that, banks have realized they don't want to own these things. They're not in the business of owning it. And like, I guess I'm not going to bet on the banks' willingness to say enough's enough. Like I don't like at this point, like to me, anything can happen. They could just kick it down the road another 2 years. Like I don't know.
The best argument for that is that back in 2008, there was incentive for banks to take properties back because there were rules around how much bad debt they could have on their books, how much assets and reserves they needed to basically meet federal regulator requirements. And about 2 years ago, federal auditors came in and basically said, hey, if you, the banks, decide to work with owners, operators for these properties, we're going to be willing to forego our typical reserve requirements and bad debt requirements, and basically we're not going to ding you and close you down simply because you've got a lot of these loans on the books that aren't necessarily performing. So please go out and work with these owners and do whatever you can. And so I think for as long as the government is telling banks that we're encouraging you to not go out and pull these loans and take back these properties, I don't see any reason why banks would want to do that. Anybody in this space, I mean, if you have a loan on a single family house as a small lender, if I had a loan on a single family house and the person wasn't paying, I'd take it back in a second because I can go take over the rehab and sell that house for a profit. But a bank taking over a 300 unit apartment complex, the value of that complex in 2 months is going to drop precipitously because they don't know how to manage those things. They don't have the staff to manage those things. They don't want to manage those things. And so the best way for them to lose a lot of money would be to take those properties back. That said, if there's enough distress in the market and if there's enough demand, if the banks can basically say, look, I'd rather take this property back today because I've got a buyer who will buy it at whatever the loan value is, why should I keep extending and run the risk of the value of that property dropping any further? So I think that's actually the biggest risk, is that there's going to be such demand out there that banks can start taking these properties back, selling them off without a loss.
Yeah.
And that will encourage them to do that.
Well, too, you got to remember the operators, they're not making money. So I'm not even thinking so much the bank, it's the operators. When that capital injection comes in, are they going to pay it? Like, it worked to call on your investors to get money in the first round, maybe even the second round. The third round? What happens when investors are like, dude, I'm not giving you any more money? and the environment hasn't changed. That's where I actually see the properties having problems. It's not the bankers, it's the investors, the operators that are like,
Yeah, I don't think capital calls, cash calls are very successful these days. I got, well, Jay, both of us, right? We got cash called by an operator the other day, and I was like, not doing it. I'm not putting any more in.
Yeah. And we talked about this a couple of years ago. I think on this show, we talked about this back when the distress started, that what we were going to start to see was some operators, I'll say they're smart. I don't know if they're smart or dumb, but they were shrewd in the sense that they decided to do capital calls before they needed the capital calls, because they knew that whoever was doing it first was most likely to get the money. You didn't want to be 2 years down the road before you were doing your capital call, because there'd be no money left for it. And so there were a lot of operators who didn't necessarily need the money, but were doing capital calls just because they knew this would probably be their last chance.
And AJ, you made a good point there about people not making money. And this was the exact thing that I said 2 years ago, where this structure in syndications, where everyone wants to do like a six pref, 7 pref, 8 pref. What's the problem with that? That's great when everything goes well, but all of a sudden you go a couple of years without cash flow, and you're just keeping the thing afloat. That 6, 7, 8% pref is accruing. That's accruing, and all of a sudden that amount that you have to pay back to the investor just to make a dollar as a syndicator goes up and up and up, and it gets to the point where, like, as you said, if you got a whole portfolio, you're looking at this and you're like, I'm working my ass off for this one, and there's no way of me even making it all the way past to take care of this pref in order to make a dollar. I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to sell it right now.
Forever. Compounding prefs, compounding prefs to me actually disincentivize owners, and it makes for terrible decisions, because they will sell things because of situations like this. Even if they could make better money, even if it wasn't good for the investors, they're never going to receive anything. There's zero incentive for them to even hold on to it. So they just get rid of the properties at the expense of the investors. And first of all, everybody, this is an industry-wide thing. I have one of my investors. He's invested in 83 syndications, and he said 65% of them don't produce any cash flow. None. They stopped. He said 20% of the deals have done capital calls. So this is like in commercial real estate, right? Most deals aren't cash flowing. And a lot of the times it's because people just stop. They're like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to roll over, right? And especially if you're doing developments, value add, right? All that stuff. We had properties that weren't. I'd put up the money. I put up $1 million.
This happens a lot in the private equity world, where people set up funds and they're like, and then it's like this waterfall that they just keeps rolling over. At some point in year 4 or 5, they're like, screw it, I'm never going to make this up. I got to let's just shut the fund down, and they return everybody's money, and they do that. So that's kind of what's happening in multifamily again. But the key is the reputation hit that these syndicators will take if they end up just calling and say, hey, look, they're working for free, but they're not really working for free. They're working for their reputation.
I'm pushing back on that.
Okay.
That's what everybody said during 2008. All the guys that went bankrupt were right back at it 3 years later, all of them. And they raised money. They did deals because they said, I learned my lesson. And frankly, that's actually a good argument, because when they went up against the new guy, they said, guess what? I already went bankrupt. That guy hasn't. So if you invest with him, you're going to learn the hard lesson. I've already learned it, so I know what to avoid. So like after 2008, all those people, they were back raising money, and a lot of them did really, really well.
But I put I'm going to take your pushback and raise it a pushback +2, and that is, things are different today. The information and communication is so widespread. I mean, it was a little bit in 2008, but this is now, what are we, 16 years or 17 years ahead of this? Like, you guys are part of these forums. Like, people are now talking, like, access to information. People know, hey, this is Bobby. Bobby blew this deal off, and everybody knows Bobby screwed up last year, 2 years ago. I think people are more aware now that, these deals, there are people that are doing well, people are not doing well, or maybe importantly, people who are communicating well, who are not communicating well. And that's also a big factor in it, by the way. Just because you lost a deal doesn't mean it's a bad deal. How well did you communicate the bad stuff? How did you handle the situation. But I don't know. With all this information now, I think that's another big factor.
I was on a panel at Passive Pockets this past weekend, and we were talking about this. And it's an interesting, like where we are today, exactly what you're saying, Mauricio, where if you are well known, if you have a brand, let's think of all the people on this panel right now, or all the people on this podcast right now. If any of us were to do something really dumb and destroy our reputation, we might be out of the business for good. Somebody that just started syndicating a year or two ago, who doesn't have a brand, basically they just start a company that nobody knows the company, nobody knows them. They raise some money, they lose the deal. They go start another company. They pick a new name and
they avoid those 10 investors. And so it's actually, we're probably in a much tougher space being large brand, having people know who we are. And
I know two people today that have brands that are so much bigger than any of ours, and their deals, literally almost all of them were done. They're blown out. And they did capital calls. None of them are giving cash at all. And they're massively underwater, like to the tune of $60 million. They raise so much more money than I ever could.
Yeah, I see it all the time. We talk about, oh, this group's got half of their portfolios underwater. They're doing cash calls, capital calls, and then I get an email from them. We got a new deal.
But I'm going to push back again. Like, yes, if you have a brand like that, then yes, it's like you get a lot of bad press because everybody knows you, but then it's also easier for you to raise money in the future. I'm talking about the guys that nobody knows who they are, right? Those guys are going to have a much harder, if they lose a deal and the word gets around that they're losing the deal, they don't have the audience or the attention to just suddenly just go back and talk to their 5 million, subscribers or whatever and be like, oh, I got a new deal. And hopefully 20% didn't hear about, their prior deals. I'm now convinced that it's a 3-layer thing. If you have no brand, you're probably going to be fine because you'll start another company and nobody will remember you and nobody will find out that you lost deals. If you've got a huge brand, there's enough investors out there that you'll always be able to raise no matter what stupid crap you do. And if you're somewhere in the middle, where I'll call myself me, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but for me, I feel like if I were to go lose 10 deals right now, not that we have 10 deals, but if I were to go lose 10 deals right now, I'd never raise again.
Now, I also want to put an emphasis on this. I think that just because you lost a deal or not, being qualified to whether you should get money in brand is a horrible way to do it. Because I know people that are basically fraudulent.
Yeah.
And they haven't lost a deal, but they're, in my opinion, they're stealing people's money. Where I know guys that have been in the industry for 30 years, they're incredible. They had a bad market, a bad thing, and they lost some deals. I would always give them my money. Because they're honest about it.
A bridge loan floater on right at the wrong time. And then like in that 2022 rate, like no one would have seen that rates were going to go up 5% in 6 months. Like you didn't put that in your pro forma. You didn't. Yeah.
It's investing. So I get very nervous about that kind of talk because you look at any hedge fund, look at it, like these guys, this is part of investing, right? And so to simply qualify by that one mark, I don't know. That makes me really nervous just because I know the people out in this game. And over the last few years, especially early, it was to say Cowboys is an understatement of a lifetime. And we even know some that went to jail.
So to bring this back a little bit, AJ, I thought that was a good tangent though. Do you think, obviously you're very ingrained in the self-storage space. Do you think this is a self-storage specific thing where you're seeing that turnover and that maybe it's going to bleed over into other markets? Or do you think this is something that's happening across the industries?
Self-storage is one of the lowest delinquency rates because we put so much down and there's so much demand for them. So like, a lot of people in storage, they can still exit and they just, we're going to lose our capital things. The developers are the ones that get in trouble, right? And there's some few specific areas, but when you're putting 45% down,
right.
There's
interesting, the developers, because actually, so I this is one of my favorite resources for looking at commercial property value rates. It's this company called Green Street, and they have this thing called the CPPI, and it tracks overall values across commercial real estate. And if you'll notice, we're looking at a chart, and it basically has an index value for each property sector, and then it has the percent change, and it has the percent change in a month, the past 12 months, and then from the peak. And so it has the peak from the 2022 peak, and self-storage is still sneaking down, which that would lend to, and it's the only one that over the past, I shouldn't say that, lodging also is still going down from the looks of it. But that would lend to the fact that if self-storage is kind of still doing this slow decline, it would make sense that somebody who is developing these properties, they were pushing through this development, hoping that values were going to come up by now, or at least level off.
It was a value play. They were going to flip
and they've continued to go down.
Yeah, exactly. It was a total value play. They were trying to open it up. They were going to sell it at CO for a low cap rate. And when I say value play, I'm talking about the market, right?
Right.
And so, like, you can't, if you've got an asset class that, drops like that and you're highly leveraged, they're gone. They're just gone, right? And that's why storage, we put lots down. But if you're a developer, then the market price really matters, right? Like, that's a big, big deal because you can't sell it. You can't offload it. And especially because they're not building to own them. They have no desire to own or operate. And that's the ones that we're getting. So when we're buying them, it's from developers that we're developing to essentially flip. And that's where you get it. But for operators, that doesn't matter much.
Cool. Yeah, as I said, I'm interesting to see. It's interesting to see these other sectors, self-storage, because we're so ingrained in the multifamily. And honestly, I'm super excited about how multifamily's doing. But it comes back to your issue that you're saying, where the bid ask, we just can't buy anything. That's why we're trying to build right now, which, it's super hard to do that with the high interest rates. But if you could find something to build right now, everyone was saying there was this huge, in 2024, all of these units were coming online, self-storage as well, self-storage units, multifamily units, all of these units were coming online in 2024. We're going to get crushed. And I just looked at the absorption for last month, and we had a new supply of 116,000 units, and the absorption was 145. So we're doing well for absorption. Yeah.
Well, let me put this as an example. I just bought a deal. We're under contract right now. We're in the middle of its raise for $48 a square foot. It cost me $80 to build. This is a market that I've been in for 20 years. And in that market, I know 2-3 years ago, it was $100 a square foot. So right now I'm buying deals at prices that I was paying in 2015. And so we get it's crazy. So I'm sitting here going, and guess what? Brand new. It's not even fully stabilized.
Are you buying on just fundamentals then instead of pro forma? Because we went through a long time that everyone's even us, we're buying on pro forma, right? You put in your projected rent growth, you put in your debt rates, you put in all these different things, you throw it into the machine, you crank the machine, and you say, okay, that comes out with a return, and we have to hit a minimum return for our investors. Deal, no deal based on that return. But at some point, to your when you're looking at this, someone like you has got to say, hey, if we're offered this at 2015 levels, even if the pro forma doesn't necessarily spit out the number that I want, that's got to be a good deal, right?
So it depends. If it's a new development and it's not full, lots of times we may go, okay, we have to increase occupancy. Right. So there is some pro forma work that gets. If I'm buying one, though, outright, no pro forma. There's not even rent increases that are included, but we look at a stabilized yield. So today we're buying stabilized yields at total cost 10. So
what's your debt percent? What do you pay typically for
40,
debt these
we're
days?
putting 40%.
No, sorry,
down.
Percentage.
We're putting 40% down percentage, or are you talking interest rate?
Yeah, interest rate. Sorry.
6.5, 6.
Well, it's not bad. That's a good spread.
Yeah, it's great spread. So but a lot of that is on stabilized. We're trying to get to stabilized. We want to buy at like 8. So if we can be buying at 7, 8 and stabilizing 10 plus, that's kind of deals we're seeing. You have not seen deals like that. When's the last time you guys looked at a stabilized yield?
Negative
on
arbitrage has
cost?
been like, it's impossible to find a positive arbitrage right now.
So that's the great thing about what we're seeing today.
Kyle, is this? Are you shooting for a 3-hour podcast or a 2.5-hour podcast?
Well, I don't know. When I listen to
We
podcasts,
talked economics for an hour or so.
if someone's willing to actually give me real numbers on a deal that they're doing, like I'm all for it. And so AJ's giving me real numbers, and then it's like if you're in self-storage right now and AJ's telling you the actual what's happening in the market, I'd be loving this.
Or we can just go back and take guesses on what interest rates will be for the
I'd like to go. I was actually thinking like a top 10 would be amazing.
I love how Mauricio like gives us so much about, we don't talk enough about real estate, and we actually dive in something deep in real estate. And Mauricio was like, can we wrap this up? Like, geez,
30 minutes into real estate, everybody. And Mauricio's like, we're done. We talked about economics for an hour. We're done.
Well, AJ, I appreciate it. I liked a little bit of a deep dive in there.
No worries. Everybody, you can go to my podcast to hear about real estate.
Kyle, I need to get you a book on self-awareness. I think that's a good book for you. I'll find a good book on self-awareness, and then we can move on.
Self-awareness or podcast awareness? All right, you want a top 10? Actually, you know what? I've had this top 10 in the back.
Top 10 has to do with Mother's Day, because Mother's Day is coming up this weekend, and I know you've got a couple kids. I know you really love the mother of your kids, so I'm sure you have a top 10 that is related to Mother's Day or something.
No, not at all. This is an angry top 10 now. I've had this one. I haven't really said it. This has been since. Well, I'll tell you why after I say it. This is the top 5 American declarations of war against other countries. So it's actually, there's only been basically 5 in the history of true declarations. We're not talking about undeclared wars.
American, or are we talking about presidents versus congressional?
No, USA declarations of war against other countries. And there's only been 5. There's been quite a few undeclared wars, but by the way,
speaking of declared wars, I just want to make sure that the audience acknowledges my work here behind the scenes. Jay wanted to talk about the Pakistani Indian War, and I kind of threw him off the ledge there. So I should get some credit.
That was a joke.
No, I don't think it was a joke. I think the audience should thank me for making sure that topic did not get addressed this week.
Okay, so the 5 times the U.S. declared war. War of 1812, that was against Canada, and which was at the time was it a 51st state at the time, or was it a 47th state at the time? Well, no, it was actually a colony of the United Kingdom at the time. War of 1812.
Wait, isn't it still a colony of the United Kingdom?
No, it's a sovereign country. Jesus, Trump!
Don't you have the Queen on every coin that you guys?
Yeah, but it's not a colony; it's a sovereign country.
So why is the Queen of another country on your coinage?
Because it's our history. Anyway, next war, Mexican-American War, 1846, Spanish-American War, 1898, and then World War I and World War II are the only times that of declared wars in the United States.
That's your top 10?
Nope. There's a reason for this. Of those 5 wars, how many did the U.S. lose?
And what was the score?
None.
Are we 5-0? Are we 5-0?
We never lost war.
U.S. lost the War of 1812 versus Canada.
No, we didn't.
Oh, so okay, sorry. You invaded Canada. We beat your ass back, and then drew the line back where?
Did you just say we?
Yes.
Whoa! If you have to choose sides, okay. This is the would you rather?
Yeah. Okay.
Would you rather
Canada and the U.S. go
Canada and the
right
U.S.
now.
baby?
Right. I'm good with this one. Jay.
What side are you on?
Yeah.
On the war?
Yeah.
That's a tough one because of my kids. If it was just me, I would be Canada. But I would do a logical analysis of the situation in the ending, and deciding whether or not my kids.
Good for you, willing to be willing
If
to
you
lose.
excuse me, I'm on a quick call with ICE.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
exactly.
then if Canada, so when Canada hockey team plays the U.S. hockey team, you're always Canadian hockey team, right?
For sure.
When the World Cup comes along, Canadian soccer team plays the U.S. soccer team, you're going with
Canada.
Canadians.
I was born there, man. So you're saying you cheer for the U.S. against Chile?
Can we talk to Ice?
Yeah. Wait, no, Mauricio, answer the question. Do you cheer for Chile or the U.S. if they play
I
each
cheer
other?
for Brazil.
Your microphone seemed to mute it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello?
You cheer for Chile. All right. Fun question that is storming the internet right now.
101.
No way this is true, but okay.
100 men versus one gorilla.
gorilla.
I saw that.
I've had this conversation with my kids for 3 days now.
All right, just real quick, Jay, who wins?
Oh, the gorilla.
Men.
Men.
AJ?
Men. So here's a better question. AJ, how many men do you need to overcome the gorilla? Like 23 or less?
I think anything over 25 does it.
Yeah.
No, there's
They
only
need
there's
to
only
be
a
willing to
single
die.
scenario. There's only a single scenario where men win, and that's if they were prepared, they were able to plan it, and it's in an open space. That's
And
the
they're
only way they win.
and they're willing to die.
A mono.
Of course, they're willing to die. That's the end result.
Have you seen? Just look up a gorilla fight.
How long can a gorilla exert effort for?
100 men's worth.
They hit a human once, and he's out. That's 1 second. He only has to last 3 minutes.
Oh, not even close. No way. Like he would tire out so fast. We slaughter 50 people. Him trying to move 50 people's dead bodies
He doesn't have to.
alone.
He's going to step over them. If we can pick the men and we can let them strategize, and it's an open area, that's the only way we're winning. If any other scenario, if it's in the woods or
Throw
like the
10 midgets.
forest,
Well, let's get clear on that. When you say men, how are we defining that?
you could pick women if you want, Mauricio. This is not a
I'm
Title
out.
IX issue.
Yeah. Okay. Am I out? Am I
No,
personally out? or-
you're out.
You would not be on my list of people I pick. I guess I'll put it that way.
You're going to be busy swallowing a camera.
What I'm saying is if a gorilla walks into just a random room with 100 men and they don't know, they're not prepared for it, it's a massacre.
No chance. I don't believe that. I can just imagine 10 men jumping on the gorilla.
Yeah.
That'll like neutralize it, and the other 10 men.
Mauricio, you think that you could get 10 men to work? If it's me and you and a gorilla's charging at me, I'm throwing you at the gorilla. I hope you realize that, right?
I understand that, but if it's you, me, and 98 other people, one of them being AJ and his beard, I'm in.
Every man for himself in a normal scenario, and that leads to the gorilla smoking us.
Okay, what about if every man gets $1 million if they win?
It doesn't matter if they have to fight, because in that scenario too, the gorilla would just run away. The gorilla's not going to fight 100 men. He's going to try to get out of the way.
Yeah, they're coming for your family, and you have to stand ground.
It's a crazed gorilla.
It's a crazed gorilla, and it's
And
you.
crazed men too.
They're coming for your family. You gotta stand up. You gotta stand up.
If it is a gorilla against any human, I don't care. 1, 10, like, no way. A human doesn't stand a chance against a gorilla. But 100 of them, it's just
100 of them with no plan. Like, what would your plan be? Because your plan would be
Jump
different
on
from
it.
mine.
It
It would
would
be
be
different
all-
pages.
You run it,
Jump
and you
on
run
it.
and
How
jump
about
on
you
it.
guys take
Jump on
this
it.
offline and then come
Jump
back
on
next
it.
week?
AJ,
and-
are you going to be the first one to go and do that when there's 99 people around you?
Listen, I am very good at motivating people and directing.
Exactly. I'm going to wait for
and
the
don't
first 50
forget,
to you jump
AJ
on the gorilla, and then I'm going to jump.
And don't forget, AJ has some really great stabilizing features that he's really good at stabilizing himself.
That's a good point.
All right, we all back next week?
That was longer than the real estate segment.
That was fun. I see why everyone discusses this. Apparently we're 2-2 on this one. We all back next week? We good?
Back next
We're all
week.
back. We're all back.
Hopefully Tuesday.
All right. Hopefully Tuesday. It's all right. I'll see you next Tuesday.